Upon entering the campus novel as the villainous male supporting character, I gave the male lead, Rio, 2 solid slaps in front of my cheating girlfriend, Selena, and everyone else at the flag-raising platform. Sorry, just bullied my half-brother, I said, feeling satisfied with myself. Back to my old tricks as the villainous male supporting character. After all, too many debts don't weigh you down. Being a simp isn't my style. Chapter 1. At this moment, in the monthly assembly at Area A's middle school, a sea of students sat beneath the flagpole. Those being reprimanded or praised stood on the stage, but there were only 2 of us. One was me, the other was the male lead, Rio. The teacher said, last week, Ichi from Class 1, Grade 3, publicly bullied his classmate Rio in the hallway and was caught on the spot by the principal. The situation is serious, so we are issuing a formal reprimand and asking him to reflect on his actions. When the female teacher read out my name, she didn't even try to hide her contempt. I stood on stage, my expression unchanged, as I took the microphone from the teacher's hand. I said, last week, I verbally bullied my classmate. As for that, I paused, giving a wicked smile before continuing. I am incredibly pleased with myself. Of course, I also hope he will remember what I said and be deeply impacted by it. Upon hearing this, the students below erupted in shock. The teachers on stage immediately turned pale. I smugly watched their expressions change. What was this? Just a small beginning, nothing more. Standing behind me, Rio, who had been smiling proudly just moments ago, now looked horrified. When I suddenly turned toward him and started walking in his direction, he involuntarily took a few steps back. But it was too late. 2 loud slaps echoed in the room. I clapped my hands together, feeling the heat in my palms, as I looked down at Rio, who was now on the ground. I couldn't help but smile wider. I said, sorry, I bullied my half-brother. I'll reflect on that. But if this illegitimate child dares to come to my doorstep again, I'll still hit him. My mocking voice echoed through the microphone, reaching every student in the audience. Seeing this, the teacher quickly rushed forward and snatched the microphone from my hand, fearing I might say something even more outrageous. I walked off the stage, leaving them behind as I proudly strutted away. Only a mess and a group of onlookers remained. Rio's moment of praise today was definitely gone in the wind. If I remember correctly, in the book, the original protagonist did exactly this today, publicly read out an apology letter admitting to his bullying actions. The malicious male side character receiving criticism sharply contrasted with the male lead, who had always been seen as a top student in the eyes of others. From then on, the protagonist's high school life was marred by isolation from classmates. No matter what he did, others would link it to bullying Rio, even if the protagonist hadn't done anything wrong. Was it wrong to warn Rio, as an illegitimate child, to stay away from my fiancée? Was it wrong to tell him not to act wild in my house? No, there was nothing wrong with it. The only mistake was that the original protagonist didn't act ruthlessly enough toward him. Not being ruthless enough as the villain side character. That was the real taboo. Chapter 2. Following the memory, I walked toward the school gate and quickly dialed the driver's number, asking him to come pick me up. When I reached the gate, the security guard stepped in front of me with a serious look and stopped me. The guard said, "Student, you're not allowed to leave the school during class hours." Seeing that he wasn't being hostile, I didn't want to make things difficult for him. I turned away sharply, twisting my thigh, and said with a pained expression, "Sir, my mother passed away. I need to go home immediately." The guard awkwardly withdrew his hand, his face showing sympathy. He sighed a few times before patting my back and saying, "Your mother wouldn't want to see you like this. Go ahead, hurry." As I walked out of the school gate, the guard continued to watch me with a sympathetic gaze. Once outside, I saw that the driver was still on the road and estimated it would take him another 20 minutes. Looking around at the variety of shops, I quickly picked out a barbecue place. Inside, there were only a few scattered people, and I ordered 20 skewers of grilled kidneys. Sitting down in a quiet corner, I loved grilled kidneys. It was a habit I brought from my previous life, especially when I was in a good mood. I'd reward myself with a few skewers. I enjoyed my meal, alternating between the juicy kidneys and a soda. Just as I was savoring a bite, a light, gentle voice sounded by my ear. The voice said, "You're amazing. You hit him so symmetrically." I turned around, and there stood a young girl in a school uniform, gracefully standing behind me. Her skin was fair, her features delicate, and her elegant curves made even the school uniform look stunning. I shook the skewer in my hand, looking at her with a somewhat uncertain gaze. I asked, "Are you talking to me?" She nodded, her eyes clear. "Of course," she replied. I coldly turned my head away and said, "I don't know you." Upon hearing this, the girl visibly flinched, her body halting mid-motion as she was about to sit down. Beep, beep, beep. Just then, the driver called me. I stood up and began to leave. She watched me, opening her mouth as if to say something, but held back. I had no time to play guessing games with this little girl. Chapter 3. As soon as I entered the house, I hadn't even taken off my shoes before my mother started on me, yelling. She said, "You have no respect for your teachers, you bully your classmates, and you even aired our family's dirty laundry. What the hell do you want to do?" My expression remained calm, and there was no real ripple in my heart. I had already predicted this outcome. After placing my shoes, I slightly lifted my eyelids and finally focused on my mother. She was a woman still holding on to her charm despite her age. No wonder she had managed to mesmerize my father back in the day, causing him to sever ties with his grandparents and marry her at all costs. But in the end, he had made a mistake. He died without knowing that before being with her, he had secretly had a child with another man, hiding him in her hometown and sending money every month to support him. I walked past my mother toward the couch and with a light tone asked, "What else? Should I just let that illegitimate child walk all over me?" Just moments ago, my mother had been hysterical, but now she fell silent. She bit her lip and said, "What illegitimate child? He's your brother, your family. I just plan to bring him home soon. Why are you making such a fuss?" From the way she spoke, it sounded like everything was my fault. I smiled and said, "What brother? I don't have the habit of casually recognizing brothers. You'd better not, either. And this villa belongs to the Takahashi family, not the Saito family. If things really get chaotic, I'm sure Grandpa and Grandma will come to discipline me. You don't need to be so upset." My tone wasn't different, and each word struck hard. The Saito family was far from a prestigious one. All we had today was thanks to the protection of the Takahashi family. My mother had long since run her own company into the ground. These years, she had only survived because of the dividends I received from the Takahashi Group shares. Even the villa we lived in was registered under my name. She frowned, clearly unhappy, and snapped, "Is this how you talk to your mother? How could I have given birth to such a child? Am I not allowed to scold you? You Takahashi family people are all the same." My mother was furious, stomping her feet and grabbing a feather duster, clearly intending to discipline me. I stretched my wrists, expressionless, and just stared at her. At that moment, Hannah, who had been watching from the shadows for a while, quickly stepped forward and said, "Madam, please don't get so upset. If something happens to you, wouldn't we need to call Mr. Takahashi on the other end?" Hannah was sent by Grandpa to watch over me, since I was the only heir of the Takahashi family. Nothing could go wrong. I smiled and said, "Mother, it's better if you calm down. I'm going to rest now. Being scolded is exhausting." I glanced at my mother, who was on the verge of exploding, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. It felt tiring just talking to her. Later, according to Hannah, after I left, my mother received a call from none other than Rio. All the anger she couldn't vent on me was poured out on him. She cursed him for 2 whole hours. I hadn't expected this, but I rather enjoyed the development. Chapter 4. The next day, I entered school as usual, but along the way, I noticed everyone was looking at me strangely. A district high school was known as the top elite school for the wealthy. The people there were either rich or noble. As for me, I was the first to openly speak about having an illegitimate sibling. As soon as I walked into the classroom, all eyes turned to me. Someone muttered, "Oh, someone still has the face to come to class." If it were me, I'd have applied to drop out by now. The 2 people sitting in the corner started to throw sarcastic comments the moment I entered, but without anyone backing them up, their words seemed especially awkward. I coldly glanced at them. It was Rio's 2 lackeys. I smiled and said, "You're right. Who would have thought? Usually, you two are like thick as thieves with Rio, but it looks like even you can't stand this illegitimate child attending our school." They were clearly caught off guard by my words, standing there stunned. One of them weakly retorted, "Who are you talking about?" I replied, If you don't have a brain, just shut up. You're annoying. My words triggered a round of laughter from the class, some people enjoying the drama. Yeah, Alex. Eric. The original didn't even speak. You're over here making noise. Yeah. Every now and then, a few voices chimed in agreement. At that moment, Rio, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally walked over to me. His tone was humble, and he looked guilty as he said, "Itchy, if you're angry, take it out on me. Don't drag others into this." The two lackeys stared at Rio with gratitude. I really couldn't understand how their brains worked. Something was definitely off with them. I sighed. Since the male lead had spoken, I figured I might as well obey his wishes. The next second, I clapped my hands together, raised them, and slap. Two crisp slaps landed exactly where yesterday's marks were. Not missing a beat, I smiled and said, "There. Now it's on you. You can go back to your seat with peace of mind, right?" Rio's eyes widened in disbelief, and everyone else was stunned too. Was that what they understood? The two people who were originally going to stand up for Rio now fell silent. They didn't dare to act. Who knew what consequences that might bring to their company? Rio, however, stood there as if he hadn't heard anything, still with his head lowered and a patient, tolerant look on his face. He said, "If this is what it takes for us to reconcile as brothers, you can beat me however you want." Really? I sneered and raised my hand as if to strike again. However, before I could, a female voice shouted, "Itchy, stop it." It was Selena, my fiancée. She stormed over, grabbed Rio's arm, and shot me a glare. She looked at the marks on Rio's face with concern, as if about to burst into tears at any moment. Rio, on the other hand, looked at her with affection and hugged her, gently patting her shoulder. "Selena, I'm fine." I was speechless. Anyone who had seen my little performance yesterday would know that Rio was my half-brother. And there, with so many people watching, Rio and my fiancée were holding each other, playing out a melodramatic romance. Everyone could see what was going on, and the class directed scornful glances at Rio and Selena. Yet, my usually aloof and proud fiancée now scowled at me and said, "Itchy, forgive when you can." She glared at me again. At this point, some of my friends who had usually been close with me couldn't take it anymore. One of them slammed his hand on the desk and pointed at Selena, cursing, "What the hell, Selena? Did a donkey kick your brain? Anyone would think you're Rio's fiancée. Damn, I really don't get what Takahashi sees in you. A green tea bitch like you. If it were me, I'd have kicked you out by now." Some things I couldn't say because of family reasons, but it was easy to let my brothers say them for me. "I've never liked you. Did you read too many romance novels? That useless guy can't even do anything right. He just spouts flowery words and gets women like you who can't think straight all confused. If your dad knew you were with some dumb blonde, he'd slap you across the face." I glanced at my friend as he kept on running his mouth and then casually handed him my cup, as if to say, "Don't get too thirsty while you're at it." Selena, who had never been insulted like this, looked like her face had been covered with frost. She was seething with anger, staring at me and asking, "Do you think the same way?" I smiled and said, "Otherwise, what do you expect?" I waved my hand and looked at her calmly. "Of course, I still hope you take some time to think about who your fiancé really is. Once you've figured that out, let me know." Selena froze for a moment, and I didn't say anything more. I just walked up to the podium. I said, "Let me say a few things up front. If anyone's planning to lecture me on being magnanimous, don't bother. Otherwise, I might just end up finding a few more illegitimate children and bring them back to your family. Also, Haru may have offended some of you with what he said earlier, and I apologize on his behalf. But," I raised my voice and looked at Rio and Selena, "he's under my protection. Anyone who dares to sabotage him will regret it. Haru, the one who spoke up for me earlier, was my ally. I was the malicious male supporting character, and he was the expendable male supporting character. In a way, we were like brothers in arms." Chapter 5. After the last incident, the male lead, Rio, had been much quieter for the whole week. He hadn't made any small moves in front of me. On Friday afternoon, I took the rare opportunity to play a game with Haru. However, halfway through, I received a call from Hannah at home. Her voice was urgent and angry. "Young master, there's trouble. You need to come back right away." I stood up and asked, "Hannah, what's going on? Take it slow and tell me." She responded, "Your mother brought that Rio home. He's carrying his luggage. I was a bit stunned. Given the silence from their side, I had assumed my mother had already given up on this idea. I didn't expect her to suddenly go behind my back and do this. I said, Hannah, don't worry about the rest. Just wait for me to come home. Hannah, sensing that I understood the situation, insisted on repeating several times for me not to be upset. Honestly, I wasn't as concerned as she thought. Feeling sorry for a mother like mine was far less productive than spending money to buy happiness. Haru, who had overheard the conversation, was furious. How can someone be so shameless? Unlike him, my mindset was more calm. Rather than letting myself get upset, I preferred making those who tried to mess with my mood feel uncomfortable. I smiled and said, Don't worry, Haru. I'll treat you to some barbecue. Stop thinking about that bad luck. Barbecue always makes people happy, and I was absolutely convinced of that. I patted him on the shoulder to cheer him up, then grabbed him and headed for the barbecue joint. However, when we arrived, we ran into some familiar faces. It was the girl I had bumped into at the school gate, the same one, along with my practically non-existent fiancée, Selena. It wasn't that I was overly focused on them, but their looks and figures were hard to miss. The two of them were practically rolling their eyes to the back of their heads, clearly about to clash any moment. A fight between beauties, I was interested in that. Haru followed my gaze and asked in confusion, Isn't that the new transfer student from our school? What's she doing arguing with Selena? Transfer student? Was that the girl everyone had been talking about lately? The one who was recruited by the school, the former child star, the nation's sweetheart, Akemi? She had just arrived and was already having a showdown with Selena. Interesting. This girl had some guts. I grabbed the 30 skewers of lamb kidney I had ordered and led Haru to the best spot for watching. Though we couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, seeing Selena all worked up was quite satisfying. But as usual, the good times were short-lived. It seemed like their argument had reached a deadlock. Selena left, leaving Akemi alone. As Akemi walked away, she glanced deeply in our direction, but I quickly brushed it off. Rather than dwelling on it, I thought it better to wait for her to make her next move. Chapter 6. I timed my arrival perfectly. From a distance, I could already see my mother at the front gate, struggling with a few uniformed police officers. Rio stood awkwardly to the side, his head lowered, not saying a word. Around us, a few of the neighbors' servants were sneaking glances, undoubtedly curious about what was happening. I understood them perfectly. Gossip is what keeps them entertained while working. My mother said, Rio is my son. How can he possibly be trespassing? The police officer said, This was reported by the homeowner. Mrs. Saito, you're putting us in a difficult position here. My mother was about to argue further, but just then, Rio, spotting me in the car from a distance, called out in surprise, Brother. His call for me caught everyone's attention, forcing me to get out of the car. My mother turned to me, saying, Ichi, come over here and explain to the police. This is your brother. Her tone was serious, clearly displeased with me for calling the police. Rio, intimidated by the sharpness in my gaze, didn't dare come closer. He just stood awkwardly by my mother's side, offering a nervous smile. I ignored my mother and calmly walked up to the police officers. I succinctly expressed my thoughts, saying, Hello, I called the police. This house is under my name, and Rio moved in without my consent. Please escort him out of my house. It was more efficient to involve the police than to deal with it alone. The best part was, of course, making them look foolish. The officer, looking troubled, turned toward my mother, who was standing protectively by Rio. Seeing that I was serious, my mother yelled, What are you saying? Do you even consider me your mother? He is your brother. How long are you going to act like this? I turned and met her gaze. Act like this. I had held back in the past because she was my mother, but not anymore. I replied calmly, Mom, I won't make things difficult for you. She sighed in relief, but she let out that sigh too soon. I continued, Since you want to live with him so badly, I won't stop you. Hannah, pack up her things. She's going to move out with Rio. Hannah, as if on cue, moved with more speed than usual. My mother was left dumbfounded, staring at me with disbelief. I'm your mother. I responded coolly. You're also Rio's mother. That one sentence left her speechless. The farce ended with my mother and Rio moving out of the house. I watched Rio leave with a smug expression and couldn't help but scoff. He always thought that taking my family and my fiancée away from me would somehow make him the winner. How laughable and stupid. The real show, however, was yet to come. That evening, I received a screenshot from Haru showing Ryo's post on social media. The caption, "Our family's new home." The photo was of Ryo and my mother looking all warm and affectionate in front of their new home. Seeing the interior decor of the house, which was exactly as I had imagined, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't that house after all. Otherwise, my plan would have been hard to pull off. Chapter 7. The next day, upon hearing about my actions, my grandfather couldn't stop praising me for having the Takahashi family style in how I handled things. According to him, the key is to act according to your own principles without getting tangled up in trivial emotions. Grandma, even more delighted, set a huge spread of food for me to celebrate my rebirth. It made me realize just how deeply my grandparents disapproved of my mother. I spent the next couple of days at the Takahashi residence, listening to Grandpa tell me stories from the business world while Grandma and I tended to the flowers and plants in the backyard. It was simple yet fulfilling. As for Ryo, he still occasionally posted pictures of his luxury cars and expensive watches on his social media. With a mother like his, it was obvious who was funding his lavish lifestyle. I just regarded it as a joke. In fact, after dinner, I shared with Grandma, betting on how long it would take for him to lose those things. Weekend passed by quickly, and as a senior in high school, most of my time was still spent at school. At school, Ryo was still his usual self, occasionally flirting with Selena, offering her rides in his newly bought luxury car, claiming it was out of concern for her safety on her way home. But this time, Selena acted differently. Despite Ryo's usual over-the-top attempts to win her attention, she remained distant and somewhat cold. She even tried to talk to me more, but I swiftly avoided her. Haru, who didn't understand what was going on, asked, "Did Selena change her mind?" I smiled without answering directly, simply, "Maybe." "She's been stunned by your righteous speeches." Haru laughed heartily. "Really? Well, next time I'll just criticize her even more, and she won't act crazy anymore." Seeing him so pleased with himself, I didn't bother dampening his spirits. In reality, Selena wasn't suddenly having a change of heart, nor was she scared off by his criticism. The truth was, she was starting to feel the pressure and knew she couldn't keep treating me like a simp anymore. During the past couple of days at the Takahashi residence, I had heard plenty about Selena's family. Apparently, her father had brought home a daughter from outside the family. Normally, such outside children would have no chance against those raised within the prominent family, but to everyone's surprise, the girl was well-mannered, intelligent, and sharp. In comparison, Selena's spoiled and willful attitude looked out of place. Now, Selena was desperately trying to cling to me. As the sole heir of the Takahashi group, marrying me was the only way for her to maintain her position as a wealthy young lady. But right now, she was torn between Ryo, whom she couldn't quite let go of, and me, the heir to the Takahashi family, whose marriage could secure a future. Chapter 8. I knew Selena's attitude toward me would be different recently, but I didn't expect things to evolve into a situation involving 3 people. One day after lunch, Selena walked over, holding a bag of grilled skewers. She said softly, "Hey, I heard you like barbecue, so I bought some for you and Haru." What did she hear? There wasn't even a single skewer of kidney in there. Before I could respond, Haru, noticing Ryo following Selena and carrying a large bag, muttered, "I'm not eating this stuff." Then he turned to me and added, "Ichi, you don't need to take it either." At that, Ryo's eyes flashed with a hint of something strange, and he quickly took on the role of Selena's defender. This is Selena's kind gesture. She specifically bought this for you guys." The classroom, which had been lively just moments ago, fell into silence. Selena, a pampered young lady, was used to being doted on by everyone. Already upset after being rejected, she grew even more displeased upon hearing Ryo's words. She asked, "Ichi, you really don't want it?" She stubbornly thrust the bag towards me with an annoyed expression. Ryo added, "Ichi, just give her a break. Be a little generous." Honestly, if it weren't for Ryo being behind her like a lapdog, I might have actually accepted the skewers as a show of politeness, considering she was my fiancée. But now, with Ryo's actions as glaringly irritating as they were, I had zero intention of making things easier for them. I smiled coldly, stood up from my seat, and approached Selena, preparing to take the bag from her hand. At that moment, Selena's face softened slightly, and Rio wore a smug grin, as if he thought he'd won. However, before I could grab the bag, a voice rang out from the door. "Only a fool would want your stuff." Akemi's voice was loud and clear. I couldn't help but feel speechless. The others, hearing her voice, turned to look. There, standing in the doorway, was Akemi, carrying a bag with 40 or 50 skewers of grilled kidney in it. Walking in with her long legs, the classroom buzzed with whispers. "It's Akemi, the transfer student. Why is she in our class? Wow, this girl has an amazing figure." There was a brief moment of excitement among the guys. Selena turned red when she saw her, gripping the bag of skewers even tighter. Akemi, ignoring Selena, casually pushed past her and with a playful tilt of her head, handed me the bag. With a cute smile, she said, "Ichi, here's your favorite grilled kidney." I couldn't help but scrutinize her. My memory told me that I wasn't familiar with Akemi at all. If a random, beautiful girl started talking to me for no reason, I had to be cautious. Was she trying to take a bite out of me? Haru glanced between the two girls, then looked at me with a confused expression. Selena, fuming with anger, said, "Akemi, I'm Ichi's fiancé." She stomped her foot as she warned Akemi. Akemi, with a smile in her eyes, glanced at Selena and said, "Well, that may not be the case for much longer." Unable to contain her anger, Selena slapped Akemi across the face. Akemi, reacting quickly, grabbed Selena's hair and yanked it, leading to an all-out catfight. The scene of the two girls, one a spoiled heiress, the other a rising starlet, fighting in the classroom, had every guy staring in awe. I didn't intervene. Instead, I calmly signaled Haru to step aside as I retreated to the corner. When the two were eventually separated, both were disheveled, with Selena looking even worse. I was a little exasperated. What could have been resolved by tossing the bag in the trash had turned into a full-blown spectacle because of her. Rio, who had been acting as Selena's protector, now rushed in to play the hero. He wrapped his arms around the tearful Selena and started throwing insults my way. Though his venom was clearly aimed at me, not Akemi, he said, "Ichi, I never thought you were this kind of person. First you go after a mistress, and now you're bullying Selena too." Fine. This was a bit much, trying to dump dirt on me at this point. I smiled coldly and said, "You want to know what bullying really is?" Without another word, I walked over and kicked him in the stomach, sending him crashing to the ground. I added, "Now that's what I call bullying." Selena was about to open her mouth to argue, but since she was so eager to shout, I figured I might as well help her get a taste of it too. I delivered a swift kick to her with my leg. Akemi snorted and said, "Seems like not only does the Takahashi family have strong slaps, but their legs are pretty good too." I was speechless, pinching the bridge of my nose. This is such a mess. Using such a self-destructive method to provoke them wasn't the wisest idea. And sure enough, both Selena and Rio were later called out and forced to write self-reflections. Chapter 9. As for why Akemi kept showing up in front of me and clashing with Selena, the mystery was finally revealed on my 18th birthday. The banquet was held at the Takahashi residence, and my grandfather had made it grand and extravagant. Almost every prominent figure in the city had shown up to celebrate with me. While I was chatting with Mr. Shu, Akemi suddenly called out Dad to him. Now, Mr. Shu was Selena's father. I kept my smile on the surface, but my gaze towards Akemi was anything but calm. She was Shu's illegitimate daughter. For Mr. Shu to bring her to this event, it was clear she had some connections, and that woman had a way of getting what she wanted. After walking around with Grandpa for a bit, I found a moment to rest in the back garden. Dealing with the old foxes in the business world was exhausting. One wrong move, and they could easily lead you into a trap. I asked, "Why are you following me?" The footsteps behind me grew louder, and my tone, already tinged with fatigue, now carried a bit of annoyance. Akemi didn't seem to care at all about disturbing anyone. Instead, she gave me an enigmatic look and answered, "Selena and your mom didn't come to your birthday party." I raised an eyebrow. So what? By the time the party started, I'd already guessed what had happened. Rio must have suddenly fallen ill, and my mom and Selena were too busy taking care of him to show up. And frankly, I didn't care. Thanks to my grandfather and the Takahashi family's influence, The most important people in the city had come to celebrate me. As far as connections went, who could top them? The party might have been a little quieter without those two, but to be honest, it was an improvement. Less of their presence meant more clean air for me. Akemi sat next to me, leaning in with her hand on her cheek, and said, "Mr. Takahashi, I actually quite like you." Her playful attitude faded, replaced by something more calculated, as if she were testing the waters. I shook my head. I'm not interested. I've never had much liking for illegitimate children, Akemi. I'm not going to fall for your tricks. What happens with the Shu family is none of my business, and I won't get involved. I hadn't known what she was after before, but if I didn't figure it out after today, it would be a waste of Grandpa's years of teaching. Akemi likely wanted to get me on her side to take down Selena, maybe even have me switch my engagement to her. Her smile dimmed as she asked, "So, Mr. Takahashi, are you really going to let Rio and Selena off the hook?" She still hadn't let up, trying to bait me, but I had no intention of indulging her. I stood up from my seat, my expression neutral as I replied, "I can handle their matters myself. I don't need any teammates. So I suggest you know your place. Stop provoking me. If you drag me into the Shu family's problems, I can't guarantee I won't backstab you in return." After hearing my warning, Akemi stood frozen for a moment but soon recovered. She pouted and said, "Mr. Takahashi, you're overthinking it." With that, I lost all interest in resting. After all, I was the guest of honor at this party, and disappearing for too long wouldn't be right. I turned and walked toward the banquet hall. As for Akemi, whether she stayed or left, it wasn't my concern anymore. Chapter 10. After the birthday party, Rio, with all his theatrics, sent me numerous messages. He apologized, saying that it was because of him that my mother and Selena couldn't make it to my birthday party in time. He wanted me to blame everything on him. Why did he keep emphasizing that it was all his fault? What was he trying to prove? Because of that line, I felt it would be a huge injustice not to send him a massive gift on his birthday. As his birthday drew near, Rio formally invited all the classmates in our class group chat to his birthday party at his house. He even asked Selena eagerly if she was going. Of course, Selena couldn't refuse, but I knew that invitation wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. During this time, Selena, seeing that I didn't react aggressively to their interactions, became even more careless. I guess she thought I wouldn't break off the engagement because I had never badmouthed her in front of our families. When Rio's birthday finally arrived, I was delighted to see the various flashy, rich photos he posted on his social media. The more he flaunted, the harder he'd fall. I was already looking forward to the moment his perfect image would come crashing down. The next day, I turned on my phone, which I deliberately kept off the night before. I was bombarded with messages, over 100 in total. There were messages from my mother, Selena, and several from Haru sharing news, but they were completely drowned out by the flood of messages from my mom and Selena. If I hadn't checked carefully, I might not have noticed his. I couldn't help but smile a little, then got into a car and headed to school. The moment Haru saw me, he rushed over excitedly. "Ichi, you won't believe this. At Rio's birthday party yesterday, a group of big, tough-looking guys in black suits suddenly showed up. Haru, not content with just telling me, used his hands to mimic their size and continued. They said Rio's house was bought by their boss. All the guests he invited were kicked out. You should have seen Rio's face at that moment. It was beyond disgusted. I looked over at Rio, who was sitting at his desk, looking as pale as a ghost. Looks like my gift really hit the mark. Ichi, why did you do that? It was an accident that my mother and I didn't go to your birthday. Why are you doing this to Rio? You're being so petty. You have no gentlemanly manners. Selena scolded me, even though she wasn't the one directly involved. Hearing this, Rio gritted his teeth and shot me an angry glare. Honestly, it felt pretty satisfying. The angrier they were, the more pleased I felt. The house that my mother and Rio were living in was one my father had bought before marriage. Unfortunately for them, after my father passed, the house was left to me, and I simply sold it off. Of course, I gave a little discount so that the buyer could move in at a convenient time. That was just a small gesture, but I wasn't about to admit all this in front of them. I said coolly, "Don't speak out of turn, Miss Shu. I just sold the house. How would I know when someone came to collect it? And how would I know Rio is living in my house?" I replied without even raising an eyebrow. Selena's face turned bright red, but she couldn't do anything to me. All she could do was glare at me with those big doe eyes before running to huddle with Rio. I shook my head, wondering how long she would stay so loyal to him. Chapter 11. Within a month, I watched as Rio's life took a drastic downturn. He went from driving a fancy car to school not long ago to riding a bicycle now. I knew that it wouldn't be long before my mother came looking for me. Sure enough, a few days later, when I entered the house, I found my mother sitting on the couch. When she saw me, she put on a rare, kind smile and asked about my situation. "Is everything all right with your studies? The college entrance exams are coming up. You need to stay calm and not stress too much," she said. Her feigned concern didn't bother me, though. I decided to play along. I replied, "Everything's fine with my studies, but I do have a little problem with my living situation. After Dad passed, all my money has been managed by Grandpa and Grandma. You know how I've always been a bit careless with money, so now I don't have any left on me." As soon as I said this, she immediately stopped herself from saying what she was about to. Having lived the life of a wealthy woman for so long, it was unclear whether she had gained any real ability, but her vanity and pride had certainly grown. She knew I was lying, but even so, she couldn't bring herself to ask me for money anymore. Her company, the one she was managing, was sinking fast. She had been swindled into investing in some ill-advised new technology. Now, the company's financial chain was on the brink of breaking, and I'm sure she and Rio had already sold most of their assets just to pay the workers' wages from last month. She returned home defeated, but she wasn't going to try her luck with me again. It was clear she would turn her attention elsewhere. The next day, I saw Selena and Rio both looking troubled. Their changing relationship was obvious to everyone in class, and there were even a few people who secretly spread the news throughout the school. Selena, who had always been spoiled and raised in luxury, would choose love if it came with a material foundation. With my mother in trouble and not able to count on me, she decided to focus on the relationship between Rio and Selena. She actually asked Rio to go to Selena and beg her to ask Shu's father for help, hoping the Shu family could lend them a hand. But Selena, already troubled by Akemi's existence as Shu family's illegitimate daughter, was terrified of losing her lavish life. There was no way she'd risk upsetting the Shu family. The relationship between the two was now like a tightly stretched string, still holding on, but everyone could feel that it could snap at any moment. And as the evil male supporting character, of course I wasn't going to miss this opportunity. I waited for the right moment and gave Grandpa the photos of Selena and Rio being affectionate with each other in the past. Grandpa looked at the photos, then immediately took them to the Shu family to make his case. According to Grandpa, when Shu's father saw those photos, his face turned green with rage. But being a veteran in the business world, he didn't drag things out like a younger person might. Shu's family had already given Takahashi's family a concession during a recent business collaboration, so they were forced to make some sacrifices for Selena's sake. The engagement was finally called off. But as with all things, some were happy and others were not. Rio, probably hearing the news from my mother, walked into school the next day looking remarkably upbeat, as if all the gloom of the past days had disappeared. As he passed by me, he even patted me on the back in a big brother fashion, saying, "Hey bro, don't take it too seriously. You and Selena didn't have any real feelings for each other. It's actually a good thing the engagement's been called off." I agreed with him completely. I didn't even feel like arguing this time, and pretended to be dejected. When Selena entered the classroom, I made sure to look even more downcast, just waiting for her to bite. Selena, Rio with a triumphant look on his face walked over and put his arm around her shoulders, clearly having tossed aside any past tension between them. Selena, looking exhausted and pale, gave me a long, apologetic glance before pushing Rio's arm away. She walked over to me and whispered, "Ichi, why did you go to all the trouble of breaking off the engagement?" I didn't answer. My gaze remained fixed on Rio. Everything was unspoken, and my attitude left Selena with a glimmer of hope. She clearly thought this was my way of giving her a chance, as if she could just break up with Rio and everything would go back to normal. Finally, Selena said, "I don't like him. I've always considered him like a brother." It was clear she had spent the entire night thinking about this. In her heart, a comfortable life and love didn't compare. The life she had now was more important than anything. Rio's smile vanished immediately, and he froze in place. After a while, he looked at her in disbelief and grabbed her arm. Selena, what are you saying? Didn't you agree to marry me? You said yes to my proposal. I gave Selena several disappointed glances. She could no longer pretend she didn't know what was going on. She quickly distanced herself from Rio, saying, Rio, what are you talking about? I never wanted to marry you. I've always seen you as a brother. If I made you misunderstand anything, I'm sorry. After hearing those words from Selena, Rio clenched his fists so tightly that his whole body was shaking. The pain and despair were so evident that I couldn't help but applaud in my heart. Having achieved my goal, I couldn't help but smile. I said, Hey bro, don't take it too seriously. You and Selena didn't have any real feelings for each other. The sooner you clear things up, the better. I returned his words to him. Rio was so furious that he collapsed on the ground, and someone had to rush to carry him out of the classroom to get medical help. Selena looked at me several times, but didn't follow him out. With hope still in her eyes, she came over and said, Mr. Takahashi, we were just mistaken about everything. In a few days, my mom and I will come to the Takahashi family to explain, and our engagement can stay all right. I frowned. When did I ever say the engagement might still be on? Selena, what are you thinking? I stared at her indifferently, and the fake melancholy I'd been showing was now gone. I said, Ichi, am the heir of the Takahashi family. Whether you're in my life or not, there are plenty of fish in the sea. Do you really think I have to choose you? I spoke softly, but it was loud enough for the entire classroom to hear. Selena froze in place, her eyes welling up with tears as she turned and walked away without saying another word. Chapter 12. In the days that followed, Selena still went back to Rio, trying to salvage their relationship, but everyone could see the distance between them. Arguments, helplessness, and compromise seemed to slowly erode the fragile bond that had once existed between them. As expected, neither of them did well in the college entrance exams. My mother's subsidiary company declared bankruptcy during the summer break before the exams, and she began coming to my villa every day, trying to cozy up to me, hoping I could offer her some support. Rio, who had once been at the top of his class, could now barely manage to enter a regular college. Selena, on the other hand, had completely underperformed, even scoring worse than Akemi, who was an art student. Rumor had it that Shu's father was furious and sent her abroad to study. Everyone knew that she had been abandoned by the Shu family. When she returned, there would be no place for her in their household. Years later, after I had graduated from university and started learning to take over the Takahashi family business, I looked back at all of this and couldn't help but feel glad for the decision I had made. Life's script is never fixed. When your role is defined as a supporting character, the only thing you can do is keep your head up and move forward.